What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today I want to talk about how to learn new and complex things, and I want to share my approach for doing that. So let us get right into it. Alright, so this is going to be more of a casual and spontaneous video today. I don't have any structure for this video. I didn't prepare anything. I'm just going to talk freely about this idea of learning things properly and learning things effectively. And I want to share my approach to doing that, how I learn things, new and complex things effectively, how I make them stick in my mind, how I then understand them really to the core. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I oftentimes get the question in the comments, how do I learn something? How do I get good at something? How do I learn things so that they stick? How do I become so good at coding that I don't need tutorials and guides to rely on, that I can build projects myself without needing someone else? How do I actually learn things properly? And this is what I want to talk about today, and I want to show you how I do it, and I also want to show you an example of that. So my main principle for learning stuff is that I explain it to someone else. Now, I'm not talking about YouTube here, even though this is also a nice synergy. Oftentimes I learn something new and I make it stick by making a video about it. But that is actually not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the YouTube channel. I'm also not talking about a blog or something. When I learn something new, I always explain it to someone else, even if that someone else is just someone imaginary. So it doesn't have to be a real person that you explain this to. You don't have to actually talk to someone. You don't need an audience on YouTube. You don't need a blog audience or something like that. Just open up a text file and write a blog post, even if you never publish it, about the thing that you learn. The reason you want to do that is because you're going to notice how little you actually know while doing that. It's one thing to learn about something complicated and complex and to say, oh yeah, I get the idea, and yes, I understand what it's about. And it's another thing to recognize while explaining it to someone that you actually don't know what you're talking about. This has happened to me so many times. I listen to someone, I listen to a lecture, I watch a tutorial, I read a book or something, and then I try to explain something, maybe even to a real person. I'm trying to explain what I just learned and why it's fascinating, and then while I'm doing that, I recognize I have no idea what I'm talking about because I don't understand the details. And while explaining, you notice stuff like that, and then you can go and do some more research until you have a refined version of that understanding so that you can actually put it into a blog post. Whether you publish it or not doesn't really matter, but you can put it into a blog post, and then you have this fully structured essay, you could say, summarizing everything you know about the subject. And this has so many positive effects. First of all, it teaches you to think and to write, which is a good skill to have. Second of all, it provides you with a resource because now you have your own blog post that you can always read, that you can always look up, and you can always browse for information in your own structured blog post, which is good if you write it properly. And you also have something, if you want, that you can publish one day if you want to open up a blog or something. So I want to show you an example here. Just one of the many examples that I have here. This is a sort of blog post type of text that I wrote about backpropagation. Now, this is quite comprehensive. If you scroll through it, you're going to see a lot of math, screenshots, and code and everything. And I don't know if I'm ever going to publish any version of that, maybe a refined version of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to use it as a script for a video soon. But this is written for myself. I wrote it in a way that it could be a blog post, as if I was talking to an audience and explaining it to someone else. But this is just me summarizing what I know about backpropagation. And it's quite low level and detailed, so it's actually quite in-depth explaining backpropagation. And we're not going to focus too much here now on backpropagation. That's not the focus of this video, but the structure here can be a good blueprint for you to do something similar. You can open up a Word file, a Obsidian Vault, a Notion document, doesn't matter what kind of software you use for that. Maybe you want to do it on paper, it doesn't matter. But what you want to do is you really want to go from the ground up and explain a concept fully. And not just explaining it in terms of, yeah, we know that the gradients are being backpropagated through the network. No, what does that exactly mean? When you say the gradients are backpropagated, what does that mean? What is happening exactly? How do you know what the gradient of a function is? How do you know how individual parameters influence the output, and so on and so forth? You really want to pinpoint the specific things. You really want to explain every detail so that you understand it. So in this case here, I started with what is backpropagation, how does it work, a more general description of what is happening. We have the forward pass, the loss computation, the backward pass, and then I go into the mathematics, which is why I wrote this. I wanted to understand the mathematics to the core. So not just getting an intuitive understanding of what is happening here, but actually knowing what is happening mathematically. Then I sketched this here in my Paint. I made a screenshot and I added it here to this post. And then I had here these formulas explaining what kind of things that we need to look at, and these are all the gradients for the network that we need to consider, and this is how we calculate them, the activation functions and so on. And then to understand it, to make sure I understand it, I actually put all of this into code. So I actually took a concept, I explained it roughly, I explained the mathematics in detail, then I sketched it again on an actual whiteboard, made a picture, copy-pasted it here, and then I implemented it from scratch using NumPy in Python. So this is actually me understanding the concept fully, because it's one thing to know what backpropagation is in general. It's one thing to know what it does and that it has something to do with a chain rule, and to understand a chain rule and to know that it's related, and to know that there's optimization steps and we have vanishing gradients and exploding gradients and so on. And it's one thing to understand it fully from scratch. And this is what I would do if you're struggling with understanding a concept, because this document right here that I have has multiple benefits. First of all, I wrote it myself, which means that I practiced writing, which I want to do anyways because I have books and blog posts. But even if you're not a writer, even if you don't want to become a blogger or an author or anything like that, it's a good skill to have because writing teaches thinking. You have that. You have a resource, because right now, if I ever forget something about backpropagation, because after 5 weeks, maybe all of the math is not as fresh anymore, I can just go to my document and I can read up everything again, and I can understand again what I thought when I was writing it. I can go back into this mode. I don't need to go to Google again and look for resources. I have my document explaining everything that I was interested in when I tried to understand backpropagation. The third thing is, if I ever, or I actually have a blog, but if you have something like this and a collection of these things, if you ever want to open up a blog or anything like that, you can just use these as templates or actually as full blog posts that you can publish, and you can build an online brand like this. So the only thing that I want to say here, this is my piece of advice if you want, because I get this question quite often, is if you want to understand something complicated, especially when it's something that is not very practical, because backpropagation is of course practical in terms of that you can put it into code, but it's not the same thing as solving a problem like a handwritten digit recognition neural network, which is a project. This is a concept that you need to understand, and you want to understand the mathematics behind it. Because if you want to learn something that is related to practical coding, if you want to learn, for example, TensorFlow or PyTorch or something like that, my advice would be implement projects. Struggle with projects. Just go and code. Try to build something, Google, try to build it again. Just do it. But with concepts like backpropagation or related stuff or anything that is theoretical, it's not that easy. So it's you cannot just go and code, because you need to understand what it's about. And this is what my advice would be if you want to learn something complicated or complex that you don't understand yet, or you don't understand yet fully. Try to write an essay, a blog post about it in detail, because what happens is when you say something like, for example here, propagate the error back through the network to compute the gradient of the loss with respect to each parameter, it's one thing to understand, yeah, I know what that means, and it's another thing to express it mathematically and to code it from scratch, because then you really know what's happening, and then you really know how it's happening, even though the code here is not in any way a good code, because it's just me brute forcing the solution by just hard coding the gradients, but you get the idea. This is what I would do to learn complicated and new things. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video, and bye.